So with that, I'd like to introduce Carl. So Carl is a CPA, CGMA, and has a wide variety of experience in different departments of various businesses, including experience as an integrator. He's a principal CFO for Pro CFO Partners. He's also a mentor and judge for the Massachusetts Collegiate DECA program, and also mentors future entrepreneurs with E4All South Coast, which is great. I love that you're investing in the next generation. And so welcome, Carl.
Thank you, Clayton. It's great to be here. I really appreciate everybody being here with us today. As Clayton said, one of my, near and dear to my heart, I've been teaching Intro to Business Mastery, or, the 4 key numbers, whatever you'd like to call it, for quite some time, going back to educating new entrepreneurs with how to understand financial statements. So I'm going to go ahead and I need to.
Oh, sorry. I'll give you.
Give me the share.
There you go.
It's going to be a very boring presentation without the slides.
There, you got it now.
I'll just drone on for the next half hour. But so I first of all wanted to just comment that my goal today is to cover the material in about a 30-minute period, which will give us plenty of time for Q&A at the end. I've only got 250 slides to go through, so it should be really, no, I'm kidding. There's only a few slides, and really I like to give high level, and then we'll talk through the issues or topics related to it. So 4 key numbers, Intro to Business Financial Mastery. Hopefully everybody can see the screen.
Can't see it.
Can't see it.
Can't. Oh, I lost my share. Hang on. Let's try that again. How's that?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, that's the first accomplishment for the day. So, Intro to Business Financial Mastery. It's one of those things that it's going to be hard to give it to you in a half hour, but what I want to leave you with is a lot of good questions. So, first of all, what is a finance team supposed to look like? I want to give you a quick background on that. And what is a CFO? So many times people ask me, yeah, what's a CFO? I have this problem in my personal life because people will ask, well, what do you do? And I say, oh, well, I'm a fractional CFO. And then the eyes glaze over and they have no clue as to what that is. So I want to talk a little bit about where we're seeing the role of CFO going. Then we're going to get into what are the 4 key numbers. I want to talk a little bit about what reports are needed and how to read them, and why it's necessary for us to look forward and not be constantly looking in the rearview mirror. And then lastly, how to create your next, whatever that is. Just real quick, as Clayton had done the intro, I've been around, been doing this for a while. I did own my own business for a while. I also, as Clayton said, worked as an EOS integrator for a $15 million electrical services and contracting business. And I did this in addition to being VP of Finance and Service. So like so many situations you find when you go out to help people with EOS, the integrator role tends not to be a dedicated role. And I think that's somewhat of a disservice for the EOS process. And I learned that the hard way. And currently I'm a CFO principal with Pro CFO Partners. We're a fractional CFO organization trying to help those businesses that haven't got quite to the size that they can afford to have a CFO, but they need to have the expertise that someone with that high level experience can bring. So when I look at a finance team, and when you come into a lot of businesses, you're going to see a lot of different people that are supposedly part of the finance team. Or you're going to find one person doing it all. As we go down the chart to the bookkeeper is the task guy. They're the people that are creating the transactions that then get made into financial reports by the accountant. And then the controller does a bit of review. The director of finance, if there is one, is doing high-level financial analysis, doing the planning for the business. VP of finance, and a lot of times these positions are compacted and combined, so you're not seeing all of them. And at the very top is the CFO, who's doing leadership and strategy. So as we look at what the CFO has become, it's more about strategic. And this has come from expansion of markets, capital markets, larger businesses needing to address changing expectations. Traditionally, it was somebody who just ensured the financial operation was effective and was a steward to the assets of the corporation. What we're seeing now is that this role is more of a catalyst. It's leading change in the organization and helping the leadership team to strategize next steps. And, who is the CFO at the table? If we only use $5 for marketing, advertising, and operations, we'll have enough to get a pizza for lunch. This is what we see so much in so many small businesses. They really don't know what's going on. One of the tools that we use, and it plays very well to understanding the four basic numbers of business, is what we call the financial flywheel. And what it does is it brings together all of the different components that go into helping a business to grow and get better. And you can see each of the items around the outside of the flywheel. And we're going to touch on a number of these today in our discussion. So what are the four key numbers? As I said to Clayton, I look at it as top, middle, and bottom, and cash. So the top is revenue, the middle are costs, and the bottom is your gross and net profit. And lastly, that fourth number rounding everything out is cash. Save the best for last. Going back to the financial flywheel, when we're talking about the top, we want to look at revenue. Revenue is a complex topic. It includes customer segments, market position. What's your unique value proposition? Revenue streams, channels, all of these things make up the revenue. So how do we impact it? A couple of key things. Revenue being the starting point of everything in the business, volume is a key piece. I've had a number of managers over the years that have said, if we could just increase sales, all the problems will disappear. Maybe not quite, but volume is important, and understanding where your sales are coming from, what customers are making it up, what products contribute to it, and that's where we get into sales mix. If you're lucky enough to be a one-product company, this is not an issue for you. But like so many companies, we deal with a number of different products. Some of them are more complex. Some of them are difficult to build or manufacture. Some we buy from a supplier and just resell. But it's understanding the dynamics of that so that we know what is contributing to our revenue. How do we impact it? We can add new products. Easy statement, difficult to do sometimes. And of course, the last thing that impacts what that revenue, dollars of revenue is the price. Sometimes we increase our revenue number by just increasing the price that we're selling it to a customer. And we all know that during COVID, a lot of people ended up having to impact their pricing because they were seeing impacts in their supply chain. Price of transportation was going up. Availability and scarcity was playing. And a lot of times we had to increase our price in order to get the the revenue dollars up in order to stay profitable. And we're going to get to profit in a minute. That's number 3, remember. As we shift down to the middle, I look at the middle as 2 segments, middle top and middle bottom. Middle top is your prime costs, your material costs, your labor, your operating, relating to delivering your products. And when you start with revenue and you deduct your middle costs, you're going to end up with one of our number 3s, which is gross profit. The middle bottom is overhead. And typically these costs are more fixed than variable, where our top costs are more variable than fixed. Overheads are those basic needs of the business. The building where we have our offices, the heat, light, and power for the offices, the support and management salaries, those costs that go into just having the business in existence without ever selling a dollar of revenue. Those are my middle bottom costs. So how do we deal with cost? We need to understand whether they're variable, whether they're fixed, or is it possible they could be a little bit of either, both variable and fixed? So in personal lives, we look at variable costs as being dining out. Or is it? Some people, it would be considered fixed because they don't cook. But anyway, it's a variable cost to our lives, where our rent and mortgage is fixed. We have to have that. Our utilities tend to be fixed. Utilities are mixed because sometimes if we leave the lights on, it's going to be more expensive than if we just keep the basics. The other dynamic of costs, and this applies to both our middle top and middle bottom costs, are whether they're controllable or non-controllable. If I go out and buy product to sell, that cost is really non-controllable in that I have to pay to buy the product. Where, if I sign a lease for a piece of property, I cannot impact the amount of that cost in the short term. I can in the long term, but short term, I'm fixed to paying that same amount of cost every single month. So as we try to improve our cost picture for our business, we need to have a better understanding of what we can control and what's not controllable, what's variable, fixed, and mixed. How do we improve them? We can buy better. If we're manufacturing, we can increase efficiency and always eliminate waste. And I showed the 8 classic wastes of business: defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized potential, transport, inventory, motion, and extra processing. In other words, I didn't do it right the first time. I got to go back and do it again. And these wastes are typically aligned with lean manufacturing applications, but I've seen them used in any business, from an office environment, a legal practice, to a pure manufacturing business. Now we get to the bottom. It's the profit. Profit improvement are all of the things we've been talking about. Building more volume, increasing pricing, improving gross margin, understanding our break even, and we'll talk about break even in a minute. Also doing planning so that we understand what those numbers are going to be. Gross profit is defined as the revenue less your operating expenses. A lot of people refer to it as my top line profit. It's after my material costs, after my product costs, but before I get to my overheads. Net profit, also known in most profit and loss statements as the bottom line, we take your gross profit less overhead. And it takes us to what we really made in our business at the end of the day. Made for profit. One of the things that I've always utilized and tried to teach my leadership teams is the concept of break even. Break even looks at the dynamics of our costs so that we can better understand what we have to sell to cover all of the costs in the business and end up with a net profit of zero. And why this is important is because if you're looking at your business planning and you're not able to achieve your break-even sales number, you're not going to make profit. An important dynamic as you plan, but also as you try to improve your business. Because if you recognize that you can't sell any more product volume-wise, for whatever reason, then you're left with choices. Those choices are increasing your pricing so that you can increase your revenue, decreasing your costs, either your product costs or your overheads, so that you can end up with generating a profit. So we've covered revenue top, costs middle, profit bottom. The fourth number that we talked about was cash. Cash is not profit. So many times people will look at a financial statement and go, oh, there's my net profit. Yep, that's my cash. But it really isn't. And sadly, accountants tend to not make it clear what the differences are. And it's important from a business dynamic to understand that cash and profit are not the same. The reason for this is I've known a lot of businesses that maybe haven't made a lot of profit, but have stayed in business because they were able to generate cash. And there is a dynamic to that. I've never seen a business that has made profit but has had no cash survive in business because they literally can't pay their bills. So it's important for you, as you're looking at the finances of a business, to better understand that if you don't have cash, if you're not generating cash, you're not going to succeed over the long term. When I look at cash flow, I look at what I have in the bank, cash on hand, plus what I received in cash, plus what I paid out. And this is not the accounting definition of what I've invoiced, less what I incurred for expenses. This is the hard amount of money that has gone out the door, looking at my bank account. So here's the things that makes cash different from profit. A simple cash calculation is start with your cash that's on hand, add whatever cash you received from customers for the period, deduct what you paid your suppliers. And when I say paid, I mean you wrote checks. You sent them cash. You can add to your cash any loans that you've taken or any owner contributions that were made, deduct any loan or mortgage payments, and anything the owner, if it's an owner, a privately held business, if it's an ownership model, whatever they physically draw from the business and take out in cash. Lastly, if I've invested in any equipment, and I said equipment here, but it could also be a building or other facility, any time I pay cash for equipment, that has to be deducted. At the end of the period, I end up with cash, a number of cash, and What we want to be is at least equal to where we started or better than where we were at the beginning of the month. That's healthy cash flow. So how do I make my cash better? First of all, I need to understand what my cash is going to be, but I want to look at how long my customers are taking to pay me. What are my normal terms and what are people actually paying me? That's an important dynamic on my cash flow because I'm invoicing a lot of stuff, but if I'm not seeing the cash come from the customers, it's not going to help my cash flow. On the flip side, how quickly am I paying my suppliers? Can I negotiate better terms that allows me more time to actually pay them for what I've purchased? The goal is to extend that cycle from the time the goods come in the door and you've paid for them to the time you get the cash from the customer after you've sold it. So I just covered a lot of material in those 4 numbers. And I'm certain there'll be lots of questions when we get to the end. But just to recap, before we get into reporting, we have revenue at the top, 2 types of costs in the middle, your product and material and labor costs that contribute to the goods that you're selling to your customers. Then your middle bottom costs, which are your overheads, which is everything else to keep the business operating. The bottom gross profit, which is your revenue, less your middle top costs, so product costs, and then net profit, which is your gross profit less overheads. Then we talked about cash and the difference between profit and cash. Profit is the accounting success for the period. Cash tells you what you've really got in the bank at the end of the day. One of the stories that I tell related to cash is one of my mentors, a number of years ago, I was working for a very large company in a divisional finance role. And the company started to have a problem. We were showing profit, but we weren't generating cash. And the CFO of the business used to tell a story about his cigar box. And he said his father was a storekeeper. And the father knew how well he was doing at the end of each week because he had a cigar box under the counter of his business. And as people paid him, he put money in the cigar box. And as he paid his suppliers, he took money out of the cigar box. He paid his rent, he paid his other expenses, and whatever cash was left in the cigar box at the end of the week was the indication of how well he had done. And I think in the simplest terms, that's the difference between profit and cash, is what's in my cigar box. It's not what my income statement is telling me, it's what's in the cigar box. Reporting. Less is more. On the financial flywheel, we have tons of different reports. As the finance person in the organization, I always go to my stakeholders and ask them, what do you need to see? What is going to help you to make good decisions in a timely way? And those are the reports that I try to generate to help them. How's this? I'm sure you've all had an income statement thrown at you. There's nothing harder to understand quickly than a table-based income statement that's representing the profit or loss of the business over the last 4 years. When you look at that, where do you start? It's hard. So what I've always done in my roles is I take this, which is what I live and breathe in my Excel spreadsheet, and I turn it into something that I can understand quickly. Here's that same financial statement represented in graphical form, and it shows on the left the revenue, the product, the middle top costs, the product costs, and the gross profit, revenue, operating costs, gross profit. And it's kind of nice that the gross profit line is above the operating costs. This can also be represented in a bar chart that shows the components that build up to revenue. This chart shows the gross profit here and the revenue, but then we lay in the overhead expenses that leads us to net profit. And what I couldn't see on that tabular income statement, I can see very quickly. Over time, my revenue is decreasing. This is not a good trend, folks. The other thing is that in 2009, I broke even. That's not good. And we can look at how the costs trend in relation to how volume trends. And what I see here is that my operating costs are pretty flat in relation to my revenue. So just an example of how you can take a tabular financial statement and turn it into something that's a little bit easier to understand. What does a graph do that the table can't? Creates a picture of what's going on. You can see the trends. You see the relationships between the different components. And you can make quick decisions based on what you're seeing on what areas I need to go back and look at more carefully. If I took the tabular statement for someone who's not used to looking at it, like my CEO or owner, it's going to take them quite some time to be able to discern what is going on. Moving on to looking forward. Financial statements are historical statements. They tell you what already happened. The income statement, your monthly reporting. I know in so many businesses, the owner is like, I got to get my monthly reporting done. That's to tell them what already happened. So we want to focus our financial reporting on what's going to happen. Looking forward. You can't drive your car by looking in the rearview mirror all the time. If you're going forward, of course. You've got to make sure that you're looking forward through the windshield, not through the rearview window. And EOS is great for providing us with tools to help us develop a forward-looking perspective, that being the scorecard. When you're building out the scorecard for your business, you want to make sure that you've really been critical about what key measures really define business success or department success if you're running your scorecard down to departmental level, which many businesses do. I know that's what we did in our business. We had some company measures and we had some departmental measures. These should be critical measures of departmental or business success. You want those measures to predict the future, not tell you what you already know. And it's important that we review it often, at least weekly at the L10, maybe more frequently if it's a more critical measure. Most importantly, these measures should be driving your decision making. I always would check in with my leadership team, my stakeholders and ask them if the information I was providing them from the finance role was helping them to make decisions timely and correctly, so that they were able to direct the business heading in the right direction. If the answer was no, I needed to step back, take another look, and come up with something better. So what's some examples of some really good measures of future performance? Your sales and revenue backlog. What have I got in the pipeline that is for the future? And I challenge businesses to time phase that backlog. How far in the future is it going? What does it represent in sales dollars? And better understanding the dynamics of your business, how much of your sales comes in during the current month? How much of it is in backlog when you start the month? Look at your quote volume and conversion rate. If you're a business that provides quotes to your customers, you want to be looking at how many customers are coming and asking for quotes, and how many of them close, and what do they translate into revenue, and how much of it finds its way into backlog. You want to look at your customer satisfaction, because NPS is a very good predictor of future success. If your NPS score is trending downward, that's a sign that you're going to have a future issue. You're already having an issue, and you need to get into why that's happening. One of those things that I used to look at all the time from my manufacturing business was my product damage trends and what was happening on the floor. Hand in hand with that was labor efficiency. And being able to look at how things were being, my product quality, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We used to report our damage results on a 24-hour cycle. And in some cases, it was even more frequent than that. We might report twice a day, depending upon the type of business. Why? Because if I've got an issue with product quality, I want to deal with that yesterday. I don't want to deal with it tomorrow. If I can't fix it immediately, I'm going to produce a lot of garbage. And I can't sell garbage. Labor efficiency is the same thing in a way, because you want to make sure your workforce is working at the rate and the effectiveness that you need it to. If it isn't, you're going to see a trend develop that you can't produce the volume that you need to keep your customers happy. Couple of cash flow forecast tools, a cash forecast, where you actually project what you expect your cash to be based on the trends of your AR receipts, your sales, and what you're paying out, so that you can look at when you might need cash. And some businesses do have seasonal cash dips where they need to go to their operating loans, their lines of credit, and draw down line of credit to support them, knowing that in another period soon, that is going to cycle up. Perfect example, retail businesses that sell most of their revenue in the months of Christmas and the holidays. They're probably cash poor leading up to the season, and they're cash rich afterwards. They're drawing on their lines of credit to make sure that they can bring the product in, and then paying those back after the season completes. Another one is looking at AR collection. How many days is it taking me to collect my receivables, and how is it trending? Is it going down? If it is, you have a problem brewing. You need to focus, find out why, and fix it. How's this for a pictograph of knowledge? Data, information, knowledge, insight, wisdom, and conspiracy. It's one of those things where, depending upon how you look at the information, you can see your own picture. You don't want people looking at the information. You want to give them the wisdom behind the data. My contact information is in the chat. And finally, questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. Yeah, if people have questions, please just raise your hand and we'll manage it appropriately here. I just gotta change my view so I can see everybody. So yeah, please raise your hand. That was good. I liked the cash flow stuff because I think a lot of people don't think about that. On paper, you might be profitable, but where's the money, right? We don't have the cash to pay the bills. So there was some good tips in there on how to manage that better. Any questions?
So I either put them all to sleep or or I covered the material so well there were no questions.
There's a thank you, Carl, in the chat. Appreciate your time and content.
And the slides are available, people, if you need them. I did provide them to Clayton, but you can also reach out to me directly, either through LinkedIn or by the email address that I had up a minute ago. And I can bring that back up. Oops, too far.
I'm just curious, the people that came today, anyone who's brave, is this a challenge for you? Like the financial component? I'm assuming since you came, it must be, but yeah, just curious, like, is this helpful to you? Or also I'd love to know if there's any other topics that you'd like to see coming up in the future. Oh, Raquel, go ahead.
Hey, y'all. I stepped in a little late, but I wanted to say it was super helpful for me. Very similar. I think EOS does a great job at providing a framework. But my financial acumen is probably the weakest, and marketing and HR and everything else is the strongest. And so for me, it was helpful. Cash flow is something that I've noticed in past businesses where they think they're healthy because they're profitable. And so really understanding and the cash flow aspect. And I really love the scorecard looking forward. Some examples there, I wrote them down on some notes. And so I'll take those nuggets of wisdom. But yeah, I appreciate it. Super helpful.
Awesome. And Michael Zottarelli said, how many years back do you go with your bar trends typically?
Generally, I like to look at a 3-year picture. It's really a function of the business and how dynamic the business is. I think that's one of the challenges that we always look at when we look at trends is how much is changing in the business. It's one of those things where you don't want to look at just a year's worth of data if you've got multiple periods. So I'd say 3 in general. I have businesses where I've tripped back 5 years and looked at 5 years of data if it's relevant, and that's the key.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to look back at the numbers and see what the trends are. It can be very helpful. And of course, with the integrators in the room, Stuart's said you need to check your graph. He thinks
I'll have to double check that and see, but.
Of course, integrators are noticing that kind of stuff. Jeremy,
I have to tell you, I threw it together off an old business plan that I had. Again, how can a finance guy be wrong? As I shared with Clayton, I went over to the operations side many years ago, and my accounting people used to tell me I went over to the dark side. So I am a finance guy by history and still practice, but I've spent a lot of time on the operations and supply chain side of businesses.
Which is probably helpful.
Oh, very much so.
Jeremy, I see you unmuted. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. Thanks, Carl. Question number one with the cash flow forecast, how far out is typically do you typically like to look? Is there a factor of something or?
Generally, the best case scenario is to do a 12-month rolling cash flow forecast.
Okay.
Having said that, with my tongue stuck in my cheek, the reality is for a lot of businesses, you can't get that far out. And if you can't get to the year, try to get as long as you can. If it's 9 months, that's a great horizon. I know some businesses that, it's hard to do a 3-month forecast with them because there's a lot of stuff going on in the business. And one of the things that plays to the ability to forecast cash, believe it or not, goes to sales mix. And in the business that I was in, we had a division that was construction based, and all of you guys that do construction are going, oh my goodness, 120, 180 day payment cycles. And then I had a electrical service and generator sales business. And that stuff was turning over cash, quickly. I mean, we would collect when the service was rendered. So there was a very different dynamic there. So it was hard to forecast cash because so much of my sales were coming in the current month.
Right.
So it's a dynamic. So
yeah. Okay. Well, okay. That answers the question. So then the second question was just in terms of tools or reportings or those types of things. Are there favorite softwares? Are there, when you look at like accounting or even reporting, business intelligence software, are there things that are preferred or recommended from your side?
There is tons of stuff out there. It really, I'm going to date myself now. I'm an old Crystal Reports guy. I've used Crystal Reports for a long time, and now
Does it still
SAP.
exist, or is it rolled in
Yes,
Dynamics?
it's owned by SAP now.
Okay.
There are some other great tools out there. Power BI, which is one of the Microsoft products, is one of the go-tos these days for dashboards. I was working CFO of a $200 million company, and our chief data officer was a dynamo on BI and used to do some really incredible data mining and reporting using Power BI. I was having a discussion with someone today about this, and I said, go to whatever software company you're using and look for people that integrate into your software.
Right.
The one thing you don't want to have to do is take something out of your software and re-enter it into a tool to be able to get reporting. QuickBooks Online, tons and tons of partners that are out there that you could find to help you with that reporting lift. I know Pro CFO has a package that we use with our clients that integrates into QuickBooks Online that's dynamic. Just grabs the data and develops it into whatever we need going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions? If not, we'll be able to give you back some time into your day. Oh, here's another question. So I'll read it. It says, thank you for your presentation, Carl. Thinking about trends and forecasting, how do you use or exclude the past few years with COVID, supply chain, et cetera, anomalies to get a clear picture of baseline and future trends?
You normalize. You have to try to identify the things that were so off the map and take those out of the trend. It's also a challenge that we are facing as we look at businesses going through either a divestiture or even where an owner is exiting from their business and trying to adjust the EBITDA to reflect the non-COVID items. So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's identifying those things that were totally off the map for during that COVID period and just adjusting those numbers. Making sure you note it in your analysis that you've made that change and that assumption Because if someone tries to relate them back to your financials, you don't want them to go, oh, look, you've got an error here.
Mhm.
It's very reasonable to go through that process and normalize those things. Keeping in mind that going forward, I had a discussion with another person that we were talking about long-range planning and the whole concept of, as businesses go through long-range planning now, the concept of a pandemic is now included in those discussions. Where if you go back 5 years ago, it wasn't on anyone's radar.
Yeah, it's changed everything. Sometimes hard to imagine that actually happened. When you
Yes.
think about it. It
Things
feels
have
like a nightmare.
normalized, but the other dynamics are things like what's going on in the Middle East, what's happened in Ukraine. I mean, all of those dynamics that have impacted our very global economy now, it's very hard to predict those kinds of things and what impact they're going to have.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
I always say, do the best with what you got, you know?
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any other questions? Awesome. So just I want to just quickly say thank you again, Carl, for
Oh,
joining
you're
us
welcome.
today, especially for filling in. I really appreciate it. I joked with my wife, it's like, you know what, if I can't find anybody else to do this, it's going to be you. And she's like, what? So she was thankful as well. It was awesome. You did a great job, and I love that you went even a little further beyond some of the things that we talked about, and it was helpful. So if anyone wants to connect for a chat again, this recording will come out. His information's in there. You can also look him up on LinkedIn. Is there any other way that they should contact you?
No, LinkedIn or email are great. Those are both great. I'm very much a LinkedIn person, so please don't hesitate to connect.
Okay.
I'm looking forward. If anybody has anything, please reach out. Keep those cards and letters coming.
Awesome. And just so everybody knows, in 2024, I'm going to be hosting one of these webinars every month to add value to you. Next month will be on March 27th. I'll be the speaker for that one, and the topic will be 5 decisions for a healthy, visionary second-in-command relationship. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. I do quite a lot of relationship coaching for visionaries and integrators. Sometimes jokingly call it marriage counseling because sometimes it's similar. So some key ideas from my experience on how you can improve your relationship in that one. And also, I just want to put it out to you, if you have any ideas for a topic that you would like covered in one of our webinars this year, please reach out. I'm here to serve and open to suggestions. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. You get 9 minutes back into your day. So thanks. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, Carl.